This week on Hope City Overtime, we take a look at what it means to be in community. We talk about a couple other things that are really important. Make sure you like, subscribe. You're going to want to share this one with a friend. Let's get it.
Welcome to Hope City Overtime, a weekly podcast where we take a little more time to dive into Sunday's message. And this week we got a good one. We're kind of all over the place. We got communion, we got groups. But first we have Paul being really harsh in a letter to the church in Corinth, which we're getting used to, I think. So I didn't prepare any of you for this question. But
oh boy,
what is one of the worst pieces of mail or emails that you've ever received? And I'll go first because I did this in the 9 o'clock service. Mine was when I overdrafted my checking account at 18 when I was just getting used to living with a budget and got I think it was even a special color envelope in the mail and just was like, what do I do? And I was just mortified that someone would find out. And then I did it again a couple months later.
I was wondering what the depth of this is going to...
You're right.
All I get is like political mail now.
You're right. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
This was the turning point of mail being a way used for communication.
Oh, man.
But that was what came to mind. That was my fault. Like it was me being shamed for something that was totally my fault.
What about you? I don't know.
Oh, I don't know. I have to think about it.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
I can't come up with mail. I can only think of like phone calls. Or,
Okay,
like,
you can move into phone call.
Yeah, got one. I'll keep it relatively vague, but got a phone call that threatened my life over a youth student that showed up to an event that I'd never met before that event, and the parent was not happy that they were there, and threatened to destroy my property, my life, and a couple other things.
Wow.
Turned out he was a law enforcement officer.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Very glad
He was a
you're
little
here
inebriated too. So
Wow.
that was the one
to
I'll
protect
never
everyone
forget.
involved.
That was what I'll never forget.
Chronicles of a Youth Pastor.
Yep.
Wow. I can't, I'm like racking my brain. I've received tons of like emails and I've had plenty of conversations on the phone.
Yeah.
I've gotten text messages, but I'm trying to think like which one was the worst.
Yeah. I mean, I've had a couple of dicey parent interactions in my previous role. So those are always not fun. Especially when it's just like, I'm not really sure what's happening here. You know, sometimes people catch you off guard in the parking lot or something. It's like, we could just talk. If we just all take a breath and talk through it, I'm sure we can come up with a solution that makes everybody happy. So those are always like the worst feeling things, like somebody's catching you off guard
get
and you're
that
like,
in your stomach.
"Ugh,
Right.
what's going on?" Especially because I'm a big talker. Like I'm a big believer. Like we can always find a resolution to something.
Yes.
People don't have to get, but I get it. But those are always,
Yeah.
so.
I did get a phone call one time that my car was in an accident.
Your
Your
car was in an accident, but you were not present?
Yeah, so
Yes,
here's
present.
my wife went on a trip for about a week, and so it was me and the boys, and we had a minivan, and I'd basically taken my wife to the airport, parked my car, didn't think about it. I parked my car at my house, didn't think about it.
On the street.
On the street in front of my house, we have a street side parking that we can do. And for the next week, I just drove the minivan, didn't think about it. And then when it was time to pick up Jess from the airport, I went to figure out where I parked my car and totally thought, oh, well, maybe I parked at the airport, maybe I parked it at the church. Like, I don't know where the car is. And I got a phone call, hey, your car's been in an accident. I was like, no, it hasn't. I just didn't park it in front of my house. No, your car was totaled.
Wow.
So what ended up happening was my car was ran into at 3 o'clock in the morning by an elderly driver who was falling asleep at the wheel. Thank God she was fine, but her 1985 Buick or whatever it was ran through
That
my
was
car.
probably a tank.
Yeah.
Exactly. Solid built cars.
So it's funny because she had gone to the accident, they had cleaned it up, they had towed my car
All of this in front of your
right in front of my house.
No
No
way.
clue.
Wow.
No clue. And it
To your
was
credit, you have a decent sized house. So like, I mean,
Well,
there've been other things
it was
going on
also
that you
3 in the
didn't.
morning. Your boy sleeps hard at 3
I'm
in the morning.
jealous.
Out of sight, out of mind. John didn't even notice the
I
car
didn't even
disappear
notice the
from
next day. I got out. I got in my wife's minivan, drove away. Totally did not
Wow.
see. So
Wow.
they actually knocked on all of the neighbors on that side of the street to find out whose car it was, and they never could figure it out. So
Wow.
yeah, that was a crazy call.
Yeah, that is a crazy call. I bring it up because sometimes I think when we're reading scripture, we can see some of these harsh call outs. And like this passage this week was a harsh call out. Paul was like, do you want me to praise you? I'm not going to praise you. You're doing more harm than good when you're meeting together. Like, and we think that people are kind of privately reading this and being corrected. But the reality was someone was reading this letter out loud to everyone as a group. And I just think it helps to sometimes put that humanity on it. Because
I would also go a step further and think it is important because sometimes, like Paul's criticism was good. And I think sometimes when we hear criticism like that, how we respond matters.
yeah.
For me, in a place of criticism, I did receive a letter one time from a parent after something had happened. And in the letter, I mean, it was 3 or 4 pages. In the letter, there was just kind of details about the situation that, of course, because of the nature of our humanity, she's writing through her lens. And there was some discrepancies between what she had written down and actually what happened. And then, as a pastor, there's times where I have to also protect the person. So I'm trying my hardest not to like, well, you're wrong and this is what's right, because I'm trying to protect the people that are involved. But then by the 3rd page of this 4-page letter, it turned to me, and it very much was like, I don't know why they would let you ever minister to young people. This is just another sign of your inability as a leader. If the leadership of this church doesn't recognize that, then maybe there's a flaw in the leadership of this church. And it's really like it shook me, because this was also after a pretty nasty event within the scope of our youth ministry season, one of the moments that was the toughest. And I remember bringing that note to my lead pastor with the idea of, basically I put it on his desk and it's like, I'll write a resignation for you tomorrow if you want me to. His response in that moment, I think, was phenomenal as a leader. He was quick to be like, okay, well, we're not going to read stuff that comes to us like this, and kind of gave me some insight on how to navigate tough conversations at that point. Like, this is a face-to-face conversation. There were some things that were written that obviously there's some pain that's writing through. He used he made a statement. I love him to death for it. That really I needed to hear. Nobody else does. I needed to hear. And in that statement, I found security. But then I walked away from that moment. Even when people are mad and angry and frustrated, there could be some truth there.
Sure.
So maturation in your faith journey is sometimes, even when the tough thing comes, what do we push away? How do we remove some of the emotion of the critique and get to the heart? And then again, it takes some maturation, but really being able to say, okay, 90% of this isn't right, but there's 10 of it that could be. What work do I have to do to better that 10%? And I think that's critical. How you respond to criticism is critical in your maturation.
Yeah.
Man, if I can, just to be transparent for a moment, like, I think you're hitting something that's like hitting me in a very personal way, because even yesterday I had an interaction with a person outside of the church context that came from, they were very emotionally charged, and like you said, and I was trying very hard to read through the emotion to discern what was happening. And I regret that I feel like I got pulled into the emotion a little bit.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say maybe to an extreme per se, but afterwards I found myself analyzing that, like you said, going, okay, what's at the heart of this? What's really hurting them? What are they suffering from?
Yeah.
What's the pain that's causing all of this to well up in this moment?
I think it requires a sensitivity to the Holy Spirit to navigate that type of situation, especially when it's, in Paul's case, it wasn't charged with vitriol and anger or maybe it could be. It's a letter, like, you don't know, but it does leave a lot of space for people. And if we're not good mentally to navigate such criticism, it does end up sending us backwards when it should be sending us forward.
I also think you have to be careful to weigh the relationship with the person who is sending the criticism. Because Paul, writing the church in Corinth, he had been with them for years. He had planted the church. They wrote letters back and forth. He had a spiritual authority over them. That is different, even though there can be truth. That's different from a parent who's upset about something. So I think there's that too. And when you're receiving something like that, it doesn't mean that anyone from any place who is going to throw criticism out needs to be listened to with the same depth and the same authority. But then when you do have those moments from people who have that authority, how do we respond? And then the maturity to see what's behind and still try to find those nuggets, even in those places where you need to. The healthy thing is to ignore some of the things that were personal in that letter.
No, absolutely. But I would also say, like, again, that maturation process is the ability to take any of that and put it through the filters that are necessary. What part of this is just ugly? Because even sometimes, if we're not careful, healthy criticism gets rejected, right? So criticism as a whole needs to be placed through that filter of, what part of this can we just kick out because it's unhealthy? And unfortunately, Ash, I would love to say that all of us have leaders like Paul, but because of the nature of our humanity and leadership, like there's also leaders who are in authority that may spit out criticisms with a little bit of that sting, with a little bit of that vinegar, and it's tough. It's tough sometimes. And how do you wade through that and find the thing that matters?
Yeah,
right.
It's good.
Yeah,
this was a good little rabbit trail. So what Paul was really upset with the church in Corinth about was basically the way that they were approaching the Lord's Supper. I think all of this, even though we kind of broke it into two different things, he was saying that there was division among them, but then he was ultimately saying, when you meet together, you're actually not meeting for the purpose of the Lord's Supper. And we talked a little bit about what those divisions were, and I'm just going to step all in it today. I had 2 cups of coffee this morning. So,
Here we go.
what do you think are some of the things today? Because we talked about socioeconomics and the cultural tendency for rich people to separate themselves at festivals, at parties, that was kind of seeping into the church culture. Where do you think we are most tempted to have division if we're not aware and fighting that in the church? Here, Hope City Church, Charlotte, North Carolina, today.
I mean, the obvious on the table right now is political, and I would go a step further in geopolitical, even with some of the kind of larger scale issues that are happening globally, and so there's a temptation to divide along those lines. I do feel like in 2024, I don't know if I'm just incredibly sensitive to it at this season or another. I do feel like secondary issues have become these polarizing, everybody's looking for heretics. Now, again, it could very much be the algorithm that what the algorithm has served me. And if you don't follow that algorithm, you don't hear any of that. But I do feel like some of that is getting ugly. So I think between secondary issues, politics, and I still think to some degree socioeconomics, that's always been a challenging hurdle to jump within the scope of the church community.
Yeah, those are all good.
Yeah.
Other thoughts?
I think even in the people's concept of like success, whether they're like or accomplishment. Meaning, you have people who maybe feel like they're successful in their career and in life and feel like they have things together, even though that may be true or it may be a facade to some degree, versus people who appear to be struggling or overwhelmed or whatever. And I think it can be very easy to almost see people go, their life is messy. They're going through hard things. I don't know if I want to deal with that. I don't know if I want to have much interaction with that. And I feel like that can be seen in a church culture if we're not careful too, because there's those of us that feel like for whatever reason it is, whether we've been walking with the Lord for a long time, that like, we've risen above these things. So, other people are young or new in the Lord or still dealing with heart change and
Kind of
sin
that feeling of
struggles.
like, I don't want to go back to the mess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. I hadn't thought about that. But I do think you see that. Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I think something that I've seen a lot in church circles and, of course, with my relationship with school and education, I just think this idea that everybody's an expert. Like there are people who've cornered the market on what it means to be this or what that means or how this should be handled. And I just really feel like one of the things that I've strived to be is teachable. That I
good.
don't know everything,
That's so good.
that there's always more to learn.
Yeah.
And there are always different perspectives and different angles, and keeping that in line and in balance with what the word says. And I know that I've failed at this before. So it's just trying to keep that mentality of there are different ways. I mean, I think one of the mentors in our lives in our transition from Florida to North Carolina had always reminded us and told John specifically, like, there's more than one way to do things.
Yeah.
And there's not always a right and a wrong. And that's something that I struggle with personally, because I'm like
Black and white.
firstborn type
Yeah.
A personality. Like there's a right way to load the dishwasher, and we can have a debate about that if you'd like. But
That's a funny example. As
My wife would appreciate it if you taught me the right way.
she doesn't use the dishwasher.
I don't use the dishwasher, but there's a right way to do it.
Yeah.
But with that said, I just think because of social media, because of accessibility, we have become a culture obsessed with sound bites and, 15, 30 seconds of here's my thoughts on X, Y, Z. And it's great that we have access to thoughts, but I think sometimes we lack in the maturity of being able to take that to the word or take that to like real life application and just understand like, yeah, people are struggling and
Yeah.
people need the Lord
Yeah.
and we need to keep balance in what that looks like.
Yeah.
So that's been something that I've seen a lot, not just from adults and peers, but even from kids, teenagers. I work with high schoolers now. And so hearing conversations is kind of like, and it's like, you don't want to shatter them. But at the same time, it's like,
everything as a teenager.
I mean, aren't all teenagers experts? They know everything.
Invincible and
But
all-knowing.
that's okay for a teenager. For a 20-something or 30-something, we're looking for some more maturity, I think. And that's just a struggle.
Right.
I had a great conversation this week. We spent some time with some family in Florida, and I have cousins that do all kind of different things. I have one cousin who is on a boat for several weeks a month, and he began to explain kind of what his week looked like. It was fascinating. And that's his job. It's what he's been doing for the last 17 years. He'll retire doing that. He loves it.
That's so funny. I had an uncle in Fort Lauderdale that's what he did. He was just up and down the Intercoastal Waterway.
Yeah, well, that's basically what he does. A
Maybe
little
they
bit
knew
more
each
range,
other.
but basically he fuels cruise ships. So fascinating. The stories were fascinating. The life was fascinating. Then I have another cousin who has spent one's the closest to me has spent the last season traveling. So I think he spent like 4 or 5 months in Italy. They have a nomadic lifestyle right now. Him and his wife, they both have jobs that allow them to do that. So we're speaking to we're having a conversation, and his 21-year-old son's in the conversation, or 20-year-old son's in the conversation. And he's in college, and he's trying to figure out, he's asking questions to figure out, what makes this work for the three of you. And it was great to be able to say all three are different, but we're not. This isn't a right or wrong conversation. This is a different conversation, and we get to celebrate in that. Like I get to tell people about these incredible stories of my cousin on the boat, and while he's on the boat, he can tell stories about his boring cousin who's a pastor in Charlotte, right? They're different nuances, but we get to celebrate in those differences, and I think that's the part that's missing within the scope of our culture right now is we don't celebrate. It's they're doing that and it's wrong because it doesn't look like what I'm doing and that's right. Now, we're not talking
goodness.
about primary issues of the faith. We're talking
Right.
about random stuff, you know.
Like preferences.
Yeah, they drive American cars. They drive foreign cars. Like, you know, they have
They drive scooters.
they drive scooters. They believe in a 401k. These people are doing CDs and have a pension. Like, that's different. We're just in such the struggle to say, no, there is one thing, and that one thing is a thing that I've discovered, so everybody else is wrong, and that can create divisions. And legitimately, when we look at it, it's like married couples. When you boil it down, you're like, what are we actually fighting about? When we're talking about issues of the faith, we're talking about people coming to the saving knowledge of Jesus, and you're literally making distinctions to the point of separation, calling people heretics based off of an issue that we've been arguing about within the context of the faith community for 2,000 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
But we're going to make divisions and lose sight of what we're supposed to do. And I think that's what Paul's frustrated by. This thing should be about Jesus and only Jesus, and you're making it about your preferences.
Yeah.
Yeah. You kind of wrapped that up beautifully for where Paul's going, because he spends all this time telling it like it is. Like, I love that Paul doesn't mince words, although sometimes I got to tell you, being in 1 Corinthians for 8 weeks now, 7 or 8 weeks now, like, can we go back to like, God is love?
Can throw some Psalms in there.
The Lord's kindness and mercy and love.
But I mean, that's all over 1 Corinthians 2. But what he does is such a powerful tool. After he lays all this out, he doesn't then lay out how they need to correct things. He calls them back. He calls them to remember who Jesus is and what he's done. And I think that's something we all need to be reminded of,
Right.
no matter how long you've been in the faith, but especially if you've been in the faith for a long time. It can become so rote that it's like, oh, we're doing communion this week. And, oh, yeah, this is the end of the service. And this is the time that Pastor John's going to ask people to raise their hands, and lose sight of, oh, there was a moment when I didn't know Jesus and he found me and it changed everything. And what Paul's doing is like basically calling people to remember that.
Yeah.
And then all this other stuff it almost just takes care of itself.
Yeah.
If you can remember that. And so that was more just, preachy than having a question.
No, but it's good because it's the truth of coming back to the place of, we not only need to remember that we were there, but that we still are in need of it, right?
Yeah, this is Paul's scathing in this review of the church. Like, that idea that there are those of you getting drunk while others of you are starving.
Yeah.
Is such a harsh picture. I mean, it's the reason why he says you are doing more harm than good when you gather. It's such but he's incredibly concerned. Like, my favorite point of this study all 8 weeks has been that confusion of communion with dinner. Because really, when we think about what we're having for dinner, often we're trying to satisfy our own hunger. We're trying to satisfy our own appetite. We're serving ourselves.
Yeah. Because it's usually, what do you want for dinner?
Yeah.
That's the question. Like,
Yeah, that causes strife in so many relationships. What restaurant do you want today?
20th.
let's talk about it now.
Yeah. But in that moment, and honestly, I think the reason for that conversation, and the reason it's such a struggle in a lot of relationships, is because we're trying to figure out, how to satisfy each other's appetite.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't even have to be a marriage. I think about often, especially when we were a little bit of a smaller staff, we would go to lunch and no one would be able to decide where to go. So John, you would just start driving and be like, someone needs to tell me where I'm going.
Yeah, that was only when Emma wasn't there. When Emma was there, Emma always knows where she wants to go. That's why I love Emma. She's keeping us healthy. But that idea of communion, Jesus is at the center, and the people who are being served are the broken and the hurting. So he's quick to Paul to leverage this contrasting. If you want dinner, go home and eat. But when you gather together, it's for communion. It's so that he's the center and others are served. And again, I think that's missing in today's church climate. A lot of times we're looking for churches that serve us,
That feed us. We
That
use that
feed us,
language.
yeah.
That feed us. That was a little bit of a a tough one in the preparation and in the preaching, because I don't think it's bad for people to want. I think sometimes what people are expressing is that they want to encounter Christ in church, and so like I've heard people use the like I'm not being fed. And maybe that's not exactly what they even mean, because they are in a place where there's some serious unhealth or that sort of thing, but it's still so me focused. It's not, okay, is God calling me to this community and how can I participate in feeding others?
If someone asks you what they should be looking for in a church, what's your response to help them find a healthy one?
Centered around Jesus, biblically based, and authentic people who aren't trying to pretend they're perfect.
What about you guys?
I think you actually hit the nail on the head, because I think I would have originally said, look for people that you can serve their vision, and which I mean I think is true, but otherwise it can become about us, even when we're going, well, I'm here to serve, or I'm here to do this, but they go, that doesn't fit my gifting or what I really enjoy doing. Like that can even be something that people can misconstrue, and I've been guilty of.
It's a good question.
Yeah. I mean, probably the only thing I would add to that is just balance in their interactions.
Right.
You know? That's
place where they have people who can challenge them and people that they can.
Right. Well, and a place where you can serve and see that others are being served as well. So you want balance in that. I think you're always kind of, the extremes are always a little bit like, so just finding balance in that.
Mm-hmm. What about
That's
you?
good. No, I think that answer is good. I do feel like finding a place where you can serve with people that you can serve alongside. I think that's important. It doesn't mean like, hey, if they don't do this type of outreach, I'm out. Because sometimes you're there to do that thing.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's no space for your giftings, I do think it's a little challenging within the thought of where I can plug in. How can this become a part of how can I become a part of this body? But I do think biblically sound is ginormous, right? That's priority one, is that it's cornerstone on Jesus and the teachings of the apostle. I think, to your point, number two, a place that promotes community, that community's at the heart of. If it's just about service to service to service to service, and I think there could be some issues there. And then thirdly, for me, it's where can I serve? Is there opportunities for me to serve in this community? Because that's what I would be looking for.
Yeah.
To what extent would you say that, like, because like you're talking about having the right opportunity or having the place where you can serve, what would you say to somebody who maybe doesn't feel like they see the opportunity, but there may be a need in another area at that place?
I would say to anybody looking is that you can't tell first week.
Right.
Like you need and requires conversation with staff and leadership.
Yeah.
So within that conversation, within those conversations and relationship, that's normally where some of those answers are fleshed out, where you're able to see some of that pathway.
Right.
But I do think it's important, because it's one of the things, like if we're going to be the church, Paul is saying it needs to be centered around him and serving others.
Yeah.
So often what we do is we flip that and we say, well, am I comfortable? Does this serve my needs? And again, people are in different stages and walks. You're a new believer. If they don't have good, discipleship processes and plan, and things of that nature, good groups that focus around the study of the word. So some of that comes into play, but ultimately that consumerization of the church has really removed us from the purpose. If the purpose is to elevate him and draw men unto himself, right? To go out into all the world, preaching the gospel, making disciples of men, baptizing in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. If that's the purpose,
Right.
Then our gathering together should be aligned around those values. And I would say there are more good churches than you think.
Yeah.
They're out there. They're churches that I don't think there's a magic one for you. I don't think that. I don't know if that's unbiblical, but if it is, you can write me. I don't think that there's a magic church you're going to walk into and it's going to be, oh. But I do think that there are seasons that God's calls you to a group of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would even say sometimes we get so caught up in what the job descriptions are of service opportunities that we miss out on how God has created us and ways to serve that go beyond just like what are the teams that this church has. I just remember one time talking to Pastor David Dukeson, who was part of planting both Hope and Center City. So a rich part of our history. And I was trying to find my place at the time. And he said, I don't need you to fit into the job description. I need you to be Ashley. And it was such a powerful moment of, oh yeah, there are going to be responsibilities that I need to do. Like, don't get me wrong. But in that moment, what he was saying was, you've been uniquely gifted. That includes both tangible and like not as easily to describe things.
Wow.
And what you need to do is step in and be fully yourself in this place that we believe God is inviting you into. And that was really helpful.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you do look and you're like, I mean, I can greet at the door, but I don't know if that's what my purpose is in life. And for some people, it might be your purpose.
And maybe it may be for a short season too.
Yeah.
So to open another can of worms as we kind of start to wrap up, we talked a lot about division this week, but then we also talked about the value of groups. And a lot of times we have groups that are around affinity or stage of life, that sort of thing. So it can almost seem contradictory to be like, we want unity, we don't want division, but find your small group where you can belong and grow and find your people that do what you love with the people you love, that sort of thing. How do these two things fit together? How are they not? Because I don't believe they're actually contradictory.
I don't think so at all.
I
think what we've done is, I used to tell people all the time, I'm not against cliques. They're like, we're not a cliquey church. I'm like, okay, well, that's probably because then like-minded people haven't found each other. The problem with cliques isn't cliques. The problem with cliques is when they become exclusive.
Mm-hmm.
The
Yeah.
idea of exclusivity is what creates that tension. If there's no exclusivity, it doesn't matter, right? We're going to gather together and go hiking because we're people and we like hiking. We like long walks.
Mm-hmm.
You're probably not going to find your boy at a hiking trip, but Ashley goes hiking all the time. We're going to get together and there'll be a group of people who may like watching pro wrestling. That I might be on that group. David may not. He might be
So I'm
working
voting
on
against
cars
me.
with another group. Where exclusivity robs us of when we gather together the beauty of the whole. So it's okay to be, these are my people, this is what we love, as long as the door's never shut to more people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we can see the beauty and the value of the other things that are happening. So that's why I think it feels like a contradiction, but the truth is it's not.
Yeah. And we are, for the people from Hope City watching this, we are at the beginning of our group season,
right.
which I'm so excited about.
right.
We have 25 groups for Hope City Church this season.
Wow. That's so cool.
I know, it is. It's kind of one of those things that, I don't know, you think back to, I remember when the church was 40 people big, and it's like if we had 25 groups, they'd have 1 or 2 people in them. But what we really want is for people to find their place, because we'll say over and over again, if Sunday is all you're getting, or even Sunday and then watching this podcast by yourself is all you're getting, you're missing out on what we were created for. And groups are a great way to find that community that can start off. It could be that you're ready and you want to step into a Bible study and like go deep, but it could be that you really are interested in cars and you want to join some other people who work on cars. And that's where you start to find your people. Like it can be whatever. Look at the list.
Yeah.
HopeCityCLT.com/groups. But we really want people to join them. Yeah. Oh yeah. Shameless plug. Like,
That's why we're here.
It's our job to do this.
That's why we're here. That's right.
Yeah.
What do you say to the person that's maybe new to the community, hesitant a little bit to step in? What advice would you give them about connecting with groups in this season?
I think about a couple who I won't name because I didn't ask their permission, but when they first came to our church, they had dealt with some church hurt in the past that was really serious, and they talk about how they sat in the car outside the group and they still couldn't make themselves go in when they first drove up. And eventually they did. They pep talked themselves. They prayed. and they walked in, and it wasn't like it was immediately this like, oh, we've made it. It was probably an awkward dinner. I was actually part of that group, and most of those were really awkward dinners in that season. But they kept going and found their people, and they were the ones who then a couple years later approached us as a team and said, hey, we really want to figure out a way to help new people get connected. And they basically kind of helped come up with our whole process of connecting people. And so I would just say, like, I get it. I'm an introvert. I get that sitting in the car, can I go in? But you never know how your life is going to change on the other side. And the truth is, like, as somber as this is, we don't know that we don't know until the poop hits the fan, like how much we need people.
Yes.
You said poop.
I said poop. 2 cups of coffee, people. But when that happens, you can have all the podcasts in the world that you're subscribed to. You can be kind of familiar with the people who sit near you and say hi in the 3-minute what's up time. But if you don't have that connection to people, that's not the time to figure it out. And so sorry for going somber on that, but that's just the nature of life.
Well, I mean, in the spirit of Paul and being corrective, I do think for believers who've been in church for a long time and say to yourself, I don't need the group aspect of a community. I'm going to tell you, like, I can't tell you how many times tragedy strikes, the world changes, things get off the rocker, the poop hits the fan. How many times one of the first responses from people who've been in church forever, they'll say, well, where's the church? The church is as present as your small group. There's no other way to say it. As a pastoral staff, we do our best to come alongside people and help them navigate that season. But even then, we need the help of people. And what I love about groups is I can't tell you how many times by the time the pastoral staff is even informed, the small group's already got a meal train down. There's people praying. We'll walk into hospitals and group members and leaders are sitting bedside.
Usually the leaders who tell us something's happening.
Absolutely. So, like, you can't say the church has failed if you're not living as the church.
Yeah.
That really is the heart of so much of what Paul is trying to communicate. This is the church. We can't say that the church is failing us if we're not functioning in these avenues of what a church is. And so we encourage you. We think it'll be good for you. We think it'll be a blessing to you. But we also think that good relationship is mandated within the context of Scripture. And for my Theo bros who get all excited and word only, let me help you. Even in Scripture, there's this concept of accountability and discernment. And both of those things require relationship.
Yeah.
You can't be accountable to people you don't know. I'm sorry. I know you think you know them because they're on the same YouTube channel as you. That doesn't count.
Yeah.
There needs to be that personal investment. And just because they think like you and say the same stuff that you say doesn't mean that you're connected in relationship. And number 2, for discernment, it requires not only accountability, but it requires people that you can trust. That may, and again, it's what's crazy is even if they don't think like you 100% of the time, there's guys who I have theological differences with on secondary issues, but I'm calling that guy before the guy who thinks just like me because he's put the time, energy, and investment into that relationship.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to get too deep into this couch, but I do think we lose out on living fully the lives that God wants us to live when we separate relationship from your relationship with God.
That's right.
He is quick. He is quick to point to true healing comes when we confess sin to one another.
Right.
Like even so, the picture of relationship is critical. It's essential. That's why we say that we're not a church that does groups. We're a collection of groups that call ourselves the church, right? That are called to be the church.
Yeah.
So we hope that there's these communities all over the city that are bringing people together to do life together. And I know life's busy. You got jobs, you got kids, you got kids' activities. That's fine. You would be amazed that when you make the sacrifice and even do the work, you'll find something that fits you. Yeah. And if it's not there, honestly,
talk to one of us.
Yeah.
Talk to one of them. Do life with people. Period.
And you prioritize what's important.
Absolutely.
So you find a way to fit it into your schedule if you realize the significance of it.
Yeah.
Well, and to that point, if I may, just like deep connection, like you're saying, deep connection is is a thing that can't happen on the scale of 50 or 100 or 200 people. You know, and even to your point of being interconnected, even through social media or the internet or whatever, like that's not, you don't have the ability to be present with each other.
Right.
And I heard somebody talking about that yesterday, the significance of just being present, whether it's being just present with the Lord or being present with other people, that changes our experience and helps us form that deeper connection with others that just can't happen unless you're actually physically in the same room.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. So if you're not in a group yet, now's the time. HopeCityCLT.com/groups.
Variety
or
of
go
options.
in your app. We have groups meeting every single day of the week,
Yeah.
which is so exciting.
Yeah.
They stretch from as far north as Concord to, we've got groups in Ballantyne and Fort Mill, literally all over the city.
There's no excuse.
Yeah. Yeah. So find your people and do life with them.
Yeah.
And then join us Sunday. We'll be at West at 9 and 11:30, at North at 10:15, and we'd love to see you then.